Welcome back, everyone. Glad to have you all here, and very happy to have you here on stage. I have to admit, it's my first female-only panel.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. So, yeah, I mean, it's a question we always discuss also at DitterWorld. When I try to build the agenda, I always try to balance it somehow with 50-50, but some years it works, some years it doesn't really work. But that's always the goal, to balance it 50-50. But this time we have a 100% female-only panel.
And this time there was a burgundy requirement.
Yes.
So,
Good or what?
so we have Eeshita Grover from Cisco,
Hi, Stefan.
Director
How are
of
you?
Marketing and Product User Content. She was also a keynote speaker at DitterWorld 2 years ago. Happy to have you here on stage with us.
Thank you very much.
And we have Jolene Jernberg, Senior Manager of Tech Publications at Broadcom. And we have Valerie Stafford from Erie Insurance.
Yeah, Erie Insurance.
Yeah. What is your main role there?
I am the manager of a knowledge management department, and that means technical writing and knowledge transfer.
Okay, great. And one of the brightest hats in the content industry is, of course, Sarah O'Keefe. Very happy to have you here, Sarah. And you have a long, outstanding experience.
Thank you.
You have a long, outstanding experience with content strategy and consulting customers about how to structure their content, how to create a content strategy, how to make the right decisions when it comes to tools and processes and strategy. So maybe 1-2 words from your side.
So I get paid to tell people what to do. It's like the best job ever. I started Scriptorium in 1997, when hopefully most of you were born. And we do everything content, but mostly we're interested in moving people into structured content. That's really our job at the end of the day. We also do a lot of replatforming work, and glad to be here. I'll be nice.
Yeah.
Ish.
Maybe a couple of words from your side.
Been at Cisco for almost 18 years and always been associated with technical documentation and marketing content. And over the years understood I was not the only content writer in the company, and I had to make friends. And it was challenging, but it's very crucial to learn what the content ecosystem is, like Michelle was talking about earlier. And it's important to know that boundaries exist for a reason. Silos exist for a reason, but can they be fluid? Can we permeate through them? I think that's a question we should ask.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that will come up.
We'll test the mic. Hello?
Yeah, works.
Yeah, it works.
Okay. So I started out as a technical writer, and in, I think, around 1993. So now you all know how old I am. But more recently with Broadcom, and this is more important to the whole thing we're talking about here, is we managed to move through 3 acquisitions, about 1.5 million pages of content from unstructured, 4 different sources, into AEM guides. So we did that within 6 months, 7 months. It was a very arduous, is the least I can say about the process. But so if any of you, I've done a lot of content migration since then, small and large, and what we were looking for was a system that could scale with what we needed. And so, like you, I want everybody to be in structured content, because the unstructured world isn't really working for anybody, for that matter.
Yeah,
so
that's maybe goes into the direction of my first question.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about, we were talking a lot about silos today.
Yes.
We were talking about
Yep.
different departments in companies
Right.
who are working in their own processes, in their own tools, in their own formats, and so on. And when you think about introducing structured content on an enterprise level, cross-department wise, you need to make friends probably in other departments as well. But what would you say is the secret formula to make
The secret
that
handshake?
successful? To overcome change resistance, to convince other departments to join the journey, things like that. So what is the secret formula?
Yeah, I can. For us, I think it's looking at the results that other people have gotten. So, for example, we started with just moving software documentation into HTML publishing. And then we have this one business unit. They were in DITA. They've been in DITA forever, really. And they were publishing PDFs and posting them to the web. When they figured out that they could get analytics, that was the key. You know, because I could show them, look, I have this dashboard. It shows how many people looked at the pages and, you know, all of this stuff. And they're like, well, we want that. You can't get that the way that they were publishing before. So sometimes if you can take a really good result so other people can see what the output is.
So you basically offered them something that they couldn't achieve with the old
Correct.
process,
Yep.
something new that adds value for them?
Yes.
And that convinced them?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because they can look at the analytics and know where to improve their message, for one thing, and know where to concentrate their effort on the pieces that people are actually using, and to get rid of the old stuff, because nobody's reading it, right? So.
The challenges are a little different for us. We have, so my understanding after all these years is that, like I said before, silos exist for a reason, and it's whether you call it from a sheer management, trying to keep things more manageable across different departments, whether it's because the context for which the content is created is different, whether it is metrics. Marketing content is measured against different KPIs versus support content or technical documentation. So really trying to figure out what's the marriage across these different content flavors and trying to figure out what's a common goal we're trying to achieve. I think that is what really helps people see the bigger picture. There are very few, at least in my experience, I haven't really found content leaders or content leadership who is thinking in that direction, that yes, it is a mindset shift. Yes, it is a different way of looking at things, but we are an AEM shop. Cisco is an AEM shop. We have 4 or 5 instances, I think, of AEM, and every department authors using AEM, but we are in different instances. So I have no visibility into what marketing is creating. Marketing has no visibility into what we are creating. In fact, we were on a call with Vivek a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, why should you care how many instances we have? For you, it's all about the features that anyone would want to use. Why can't I have the same metrics as marketing content? Because technical documentation content is looked at when people make buying decisions. So the KPIs need to be common to a certain extent. So trying to get people to understand that there is a common goal, which is product success, which is customer success. Rallying people around that cause is what really is the secret handshake, in my opinion. Tools will do what you want them to do. The tool is not the problem. It's the people who are a problem.
The tool is not the problem. The tool is the
not the
solution.
problem, yes.
I think it's more getting people to realize that, okay, A, you work for the same company. B, you actually have the same goals. And if you work together, the product success is better. The outcome's much better.
100%, yes. For sure.
Is structured content necessary for that? Or why do companies need structured content at all? Isn't Markdown enough for a text editor?
So I've
All right.
Markdown. He said a bad word. I've spent a significant amount of time trying to break down silos. And what I've eventually found is, as you're saying, if there's not the right incentive there, then they're not going to do it. And it's really, again, it's a people problem always. The CMO doesn't get along with the CTO, who doesn't get along with whoever, and they just refuse to come into alignment. So there's all these weird things. But in terms of structured content, the 3 factors that we look at are volume, velocity, and versioning. The bigger your volume, the faster you need to produce your content, and the more variants of your content that you have, including localization, the more likely it is that you need structured content. So if you have, and if your content is ephemeral, by which I mean you push it, like you send an email and then you're done with that email, you never look at it again. If it's not long-lived, that argues against structure because it's not worth the investment up front. So I would look at those three factors, I think that was 4, and to figure out whether you have a slam dunk case or not, or maybe Markdown's good enough for that particular use case, or maybe you should stay in Word. It happens.
Don't say that.
Don't say.
I said a 4.
For my company, my group, my department is pioneering DITA. We've been authoring in DITA for a long time, years, but nobody else in the company does. And now we're just implementing AEM. So it's been a lot of talking, a lot of explaining and re-explaining the importance of single sourcing, author once, publishing in many places. There's so many duplicates you see out there, and we have an intranet full of old material. In fact, a lot of the hits that you get are, the first one is 2010 or something like that, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. And you want to get out there and you want to change it. So we have big visions. There's a lot we want to do, but it's pretty slow. It's really slow. So we don't have anybody else that's interested in authoring in DITA yet, but we're trying. And we're hoping once we get AEM implemented, then maybe we can start sharing, this is what we're doing, this is how it works, this is the savings that you get. And I can't tell you how many times along the way people are like, why can't you just author in Word? I'm like, you have no idea. You cannot author in Word. If you have anything over 10 pages, 99% of your time is spent on formatting instead of really focusing on the content. So, which is not only a waste of time, but very frustrating. So we have our work cut out
in the end,
for us.
expensive.
And expensive, yes, yeah.
I think what I would like to comment on is technical writers have built the knowledge of DITA. They've learned DITA over the past 10, 15, 20 years. But if you expect your Marcom writer to go in and learn DITA, it's not happening.
No.
And the reason being that the way technical writers look at writing versus how a marketing writer looks at writing, the mindset is very different. For them, it's more about, I need to get 2 brochures out and I need to get this done because I have 5 more to do tomorrow. Unlike technical writers, this is my document, this is my configuration guide. I am the owner for this for the next 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years. That sense of ownership is so important, and that is the reason why they've invested that time and energy to learn that skill of DITA. But from a Marcom writer, or even for people who, your tag engineers, when they create content, if we expect that they're going to sit and learn DITA, it's not happening.
No,
Maybe it's not even necessary.
It's not. So I think when the quote was used, content is king, context is God. I'm sorry for people who don't believe in God, but context is
kingdom.
Context is extremely important. So oftentimes I've thought of this idea is that, and I'm not trying to troubleshoot the problem here, but is there a way to ingest content from different silos, different departments, neutralize it in some way, and make it available for reuse for whoever wants to do it? Is that a possibility? Because I, as a technical writer, cannot write my content without context. I will write a concept the way my reader is going to need to read it. But that concept, the way it's written, might not be eligible or applicable from a Marcom perspective. So that has to be factored in. We can talk about reuse and the advantages of that all day long, but without context, it's meaningless.
So a couple of things that go along with that. One is that you may want to take a look not at author side integration, but rather publishing side integration. So I can have a website interface, whatever, that is actually compiled of content from a number of different sources. Now, provided that we have a reasonable level of integration of the taxonomy, a reasonable level of consistency in terms of the metadata that's being put on these different departments, we can do an awful lot with this downstream on the delivery end instead of worrying about trying to bust all the silos and getting everybody into a universal experience, which again, same thing, it's just pain. I also find it helpful occasionally to think about, broadly the purpose of Marcom persuasive content versus technical product enabling content, right? So one of them is designed to get you to think differently, to convince you of something, inform and convince. The other one is designed to help you do your job. Like you have an obstacle, you have a task you need to perform, and the job of technical content is to enable you to do that thing, right? So its job is to get out of the way. Here's what you need, off you go. And so as a result, again, at a high level with lots of exceptions, marketing usually uses a push model. We're going to make a campaign, we're going to make a brochure, we're going to push this email, we're sending this information out to people. And TechCom usually is consumed as a pull model, which is to say that the user goes on the website and searches for the one piece of information that they need. Like, how do I install this? How do I configure it? Why isn't it working? Type in the error code, right? So they come to your site and they pull what they're looking for. Whereas, again, in general, the persuasive content has more of a push model. And so because of that, they're just different. And they have different purposes, and we have to look at how we can integrate them and combine them and align them and all the rest of it, but it's super political.
Yeah, and you're also talking technical writing, very concise, very to matter of fact, and then the marketing is more flowery. You use a lot more language than you do. I kind of liken tech writing to, no, I'm not going to think of the word, but your thesis. There's no extra words in there. They all have to mean something.
I mean, technical content is usually more structured.
Yes.
And follows an inherent rule set, so to say, while marketing content is exactly the contrary of it.
Yeah.
They don't want that.
Yeah.
But I would not completely agree that marketing content is, and data will never marry and will never come together. Because when I was just recently talking to a big car manufacturer in Germany, one of the biggest ones there, and structured content, XML, data, and tags, and all that, completely not of any discussion at the beginning. But when you start talking about personalizing content and personalization at scale, then it suddenly gets the attention of the marketeers, and they say, oh, there's a technical possibility how we can do that, how we can... we sold last year more than 8 million cars, and we want to have a personalized documentation for each car. So if someone buys that car, currently they have 120% manual that covers all configurable options the car can be shipped, but each car is more or less unique. So they want to personalize the user documentation of the car, the board manual, that it only covers the components that are actually built into that car. And then add a personalized touch to it. And then add a second layer of it with different language, depending on the age of the customer. If it's a young customer, they want to present a more modern language. And if it's a senior customer, they want to have a more serious language. So, and this kind of things are very difficult to achieve with classical unstructured content. And yeah, you're laughing, but that's.
I'm just visualizing the low brake fluid, sad face.
Right. In the end, that's what it's about. Not necessarily TikTok language, so to say, but it goes into that direction of addressing. Maybe it's a difference for a senior customer. The addressing is maybe, hey, Mr. Gentz, you can fix the lamp like this. Or if it's a young customer, hey, Stefan, this is how we can fix it. So
I'm sorry to tell you, you would be considered senior.
I think...
She warned me.
I personally feel that instead of focusing so much on the internal silos of a company or internal departments that produce content, we should really think about the audience, different segments of the audience that use our content. Because if you really were to track the content journey of a customer, you will be surprised that many a times, like I made a point about, when people come in to make buying decisions, they're actually reading our release notes. How many bugs were open, and why should I buy this release? Should I invest in this product? Should I not invest in this product? How many support cases were opened against a specific release? all of this information is freely available to the customer today. So just like if I'm buying something on Amazon, I'm going to read the reviews before I buy it. So keeping the buying behavior in mind when we produce content, and knowing that it is not just post-sales, it is not just marketing. Content is all concentric circles. It's all flowing together. So it's more important to focus on the different segments of the audience that are consuming our content versus who's producing it on the inside.
Yeah.
And it's repeat buyers too. I mean, you want to take the whole journey, not just a piece.
I think that's also why I was talking to someone from IBM a couple of years back already, is that all these fancy marketing videos that we do and big campaigns at the airport and so, they're all great for attention and awareness and so on, but they don't really influence the buying decision. The IT buyers who buy a server blade, they go into our tech portal, download the data sheet, download the technical documentation, download the maintenance manual, how to see how easy or difficult is it to replace the server blade, stuff like that. And then when they're satisfied with it, they make a buying decision. And he said, for us, technical content is marketing content because it influences the buying decision. Our customers, it's influencing the buying process and the decision-making process.
I would argue the more technical, because Broadcom, it's all technical.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a B2B business. Everybody that reads our content, they're engineers or above, and they're very educated. They don't care about the marketing content, but I would argue it's all marketing. And you need to kind of get that whole message together. So that's one reason in my group, we do the marketing content and we edit the tech content. We do both. And that's one reason, because then we can look at the message, how it starts and how it ends.
Yeah. And that, in the end, that brings me a little bit to the next question, if I may. Do you allow that, Sarah? When we want to convince people to adopt such solutions and work with structured content and create intelligent content because of all the possibilities that are there that this enables this technology, then at one point the question, of course, comes, and we had the discussion with IDC today, the presentation, we had the Forrester study mentioned, what is necessary to convince C-level people for the value of technical content and for investing into also technical solutions for that?
And we've all done it, right?
Product adoption, that's usually the key to show recurring customers, like was mentioned. It's about making sure that, and stickiness. You don't want just them to buy one release and say, okay, I'm done with this, but it's more about you want them to continually come back to your product and continue to use it. Product adoption, how comfortable they get. You want to see a new user reach a level of maturity within a certain period of time. It can't be that I bought it 1 year and then it's just sitting on the shelf for the next 2 years and then I'll finally get to it. You have to kind of keep track of, and that is where data from your SFDC platforms, your customer databases come into play, because that truly shows you now if AEM can integrate with that, yay, good for us. But that's really that's what really seals the deal, is what can I do for product adoption and convincing your C-level execs about that. Actually, we are in that discussion right now for Cisco. Nothing to do with AEM, but we are driving other initiatives. And that's the whole push, is that this is about product adoption and how content has a role to play in that.
There's typically 5 levels of business strategy, which now I'm going to attempt to remember on stage, so this will be great. But you start with efficiency, cost avoidance. How do I do this better, faster, cheaper, wring out all that manual reformatting that you're talking about, those kinds of things. Level 2 is kind of the flip side of that. It's more like revenue generation. Instead of cost avoidance, if I can translate better and more efficiently, I can translate into more languages, therefore I can go into more markets, therefore I get more revenue. So that's kind of level 2. Level 3 has walked out of my brain. But the others that you see there are competitive advantage. Oh, time to market is one, so because time equals money, right? Competitive advantage. And this is kind of what you're talking about, right? This idea that because our content is better, because people can find the information they're looking for, and they read the installation and they say, oh, this makes sense to me, or they understand the policy and they say, okay, I get it. And because they get it, they then go forward with your product or your service. So that's a competitive advantage. And then the last one, sitting at the top of the pyramid, is branding. So the idea that your car manufacturer is probably a good example of this, because if it's sort of a luxury car manufacturer, they want you to have an experience with the product, but also they want the content to be part of that. And that user manual, that owner's guide for your car that says, well, if you bought the DS version, you get this, and if you bought the ES version, you whatever. I mean, that is dumb. We've known for 20 years how to do that, right? And how to deliver versions of this. It's just we haven't done it in general in car manufacturing. But heavy industry does this all the time because they have this concept of the product that rolls off the factory floor and how it was built, and the documentation has to match. So.
But it's also about upselling. So in that case, with the car manufacturer, they want to strip down the documentation to only what is built into the car, so that they can then offer additional services. For example, a lot of things in the car are software-driven, and they can be unlocked by software. And the customer can buy an update and say, okay, now I want to also have, let's say, the map, the navigation map. And I pay $20 per year for that or so. And knowing what is in the car and then having the possibility to offer additional services or additional features for the car, that is something that becomes interesting for marketeers and for salespeople as well then. So,
that's how, like we have one of our products, which is a Nexus Cloud product, and that is exactly how it works. Is you have the basic license, and then every step of the way, you give the option, within the product, you give the option to the users to, put in more money.
Right.
To say it bluntly.
So this is so different from my world. So I work at Erie Insurance, and what we do is documentation for our employees and our independent agents. So we don't have, our products are our policies, obviously, but we don't write any of the policies. We're writing like system user documentation. So various areas of the company know how to use our systems that we use for underwriting our claims or whatever the case may be. So when you're trying to sell technology to, our C-level leaders, it's time savings, it's lack of redundancy, it's not speed to market, but it's like onboarding employees quicker, which error rates, keep the error rates down. And right now, with a lot of the baby boomers retiring, there's a lot of focus on let's capture that information and make sure we keep it up to date, because people are leaving in droves and new people are coming in droves. And a lot of the new people coming in probably aren't going to have 20, 30, 40-year careers with the company like a lot of us have had. So it's a different take. It's pretty much internal, but it's also competitive advantage. So,
well, it is because the more quickly your employees can do their job, the more policies you can write.
And the more satisfied the employees are, because the employees
because
today...
they're not frustrated by...
They're not frustrated, yep. And they're going to maybe stay longer than, this isn't moving fast enough.
Yep.
I can't get the information I need. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to ask. So, so mine's a little bit different than selling a product or whatever. Well, we sell products, but I don't.
I find it interesting that a standard like DIDA, which was originally more in the IT industry, like IBM has invented that standard, and was primarily used with IT hardware manufacturers or software manufacturers for software documentation, has somehow developed a lot into other industries. Financial industry, insurances, BFSI in general. So what would you say is the reason for that? Is it about data, or is it more about structured content in general?
I would think it would be structured content. For all the reasons we've talked about. Reuse. Reuse across the silos is certainly more difficult because everybody's got a different agenda. Context is everything, yeah. But I would have to say it's the structured content.
Yeah, I mean, it's component level, right? And so it doesn't matter what the industry is. A component is a component.
Right.
When you talk to engineers, they usually get the idea pretty fast because they're used to thinking components.
They absolutely do. We have engineers in one of our business units that do very confidential, they do for one customer. They're using data. They've figured out how to script things out. They push things in, they push things out. And they're very easy to support, and they got it like that.
If you want to grow that in the company into other departments and broaden the use case for structured content, at some point we also need to measure it. Measure the performance of the content, measure the success of the content. We saw a couple of data points in the IDC study today, how they approached it and how much, I think 3.8 million was the number of revenue gains that the company had in average by implementing AM guides, for example. But getting these data points is a little bit of a scientific effort. And how would you approach that? Probably not every company can hire IDC to make such a dedicated study only for them. So do you have some ideas or approaches how to measure the success of the content?
We have not had any discussion around ROI, etc., but I know for a fact that data implementation does require very good information architect skills. I think every group, every content entity should have an information architect to guide the teams through reuse. Reuse for the sake of reuse is not correct. I will not use a 4-letter word, and I think it creates problems. It's unnecessary. It becomes too process heavy, and I don't think that's efficient. There are times when I have made the decision to not use structured content because of the sheer fact that our audiences are more are younger, for that matter. You have to use a conversational style of writing. Mm-hmm. You have to, I would rather create a 10-page book using another platform versus investing the time in creating a data-based document because of the sheer fact that with reuse comes bad habits too. People want to keep on reusing without branch and merge, which we are still waiting for AM to implement.
And so are we.
But reuse needs good habits. If you want to reuse, you have to have good habits. And I cannot instill good habits in a team of 500 writers, for example. Just saying. It's hard. It's the truth of those are the challenges we run into. Hmm?
It's a really good point, though, that you will get what you measure, right? So pick your metrics carefully, because whatever you choose to measure, they know they're evaluated on that, so they will perform to that thing. Mm-hmm. I almost always come back to questions of revenue and ROI and business case. So usually we measure second order effects like call deflection or people looking things up successfully, that kind of thing. That's kind of a second level. The number one place you're going to get hard ROI numbers easily is localization. Because nearly always it's an outside vendor, which means you have a cost associated with that. And you can look at not just what are we paying and can we cut this because of better reuse, better terminology, which by the way we haven't really talked about, but terminology very important. But in addition to that, if you can cut your localization time, right? If you're if you're in a localized market and you have $100 million a year in that market, that's something like $10 million a month or I don't know, math, right? So if you can cut a month off of that delay, it's worth an enormous amount of money to be able to do that. And so that's a place you can get ROI by showing that we can deliver in country, in the right language faster, and therefore we can start collecting revenue from that particular market earlier, which is worth actual real money that can be calculated by people who are not me. So localization, reuse, like you said, can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, and then you have those other effects. The marketing side talks about engagement. Ideally, you don't really want people to engage with your technical content because when they do, it means they're blocked. Right? So you want them to engage, get the information they needed, and bail.
Yes.
We don't want them clicking around. We don't want them reading the whole book. No. We don't want any of that. We want them to just get the information they need and move on.
The right information at the right time in the right context.
There was a book we all used to use once upon a time. Every page is page one.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
You remember?
Yes.
So a lot of times when we create topics, that's usually the school of thought we follow. But yeah, there isn't 100% of a solution, at least not, I haven't seen one yet. It's a combination of many factors that we have to consider. And one of the things that's becoming very big for us in my group is more of a task-based way of writing content. The user comes in, they have a use case in mind. How do you address that use case? In which scenario it's not, a sentence of an answer. They are going to read a bunch of things together, in which again context has a big role to play, and that is where structured or data per se does not answer my problem. So,
No, but you can look at the analytics and see.
and I can show you.
TechHubs is way different than marketing content.
But we did use a different platform for this specific kind of writing, and
Sure.
the metrics are the success metrics, it's very clear in terms of engagement, in terms of seeing what the bounce rate is and things like that. There are solutions out there. The question is, what exactly are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and we have been unable to get any kind of metrics ever yet for our content. So we are very excited to be going into AEM and getting ourselves set up so that we can, because it was difficult justifying a project to get a new tool, because they want to know, well, how much are your documents being used? Who's using them? And we have no insight into that. And believe me, I wish we would, because we want to make sure we're focusing on things that are going to be beneficial to, our agents and our employees. So, it's the word count thing that people are like, well, can you count the pages? Can you count the words? Like, no.
You can, but.
Well, you can, but it doesn't mean much.
Now people are either going to write really long or really short. depending on
Exactly.
what you're doing.
Yeah. No images,
The more channels you publish into, right, the more different places you're publishing your content. Websites, PDF, JSON feeds, mobile apps, what am I forgetting? All the other things, all these weirdo locations that all your content needs to go. Friction is expensive. Every time you have to copy and paste or do something manually or do it by hand or reformat it because format A doesn't work over here, that type of thing. You invest in automation, you program all of that, you script it, and it just works. And so the more content you have, and the higher your scale, right, the more value you're going to get out of that automation. So that's another place to look.
We run metrics on our content on a quarterly basis. We use Adobe Analytics, actually. And the key comparison that is in our face is at a high level, we create two types of content. One is your traditional configuration guides, user guides, etc. And then we also create what we call as matrices, basically release compatibility, product compatibility, hardware, software support. So we create. Now the funny thing is that information is included in the config guides as well. But when you look at the metrics in terms of content usage and visits and such, unique visits per se, our matrices get far more hits as compared to our config guides. And it's a clear answer that no one wants to read 500 pages to find that one piece of information. No one wants to do that. And this goes back to one of the key trends in our industry today is self-service. How much information can you provide to your user within a certain, in a frame or in 5 seconds, can they get the answer to their problem or the question? And that ties into, whatever in our UI-based products, what's the error, how well written it is, how well structured it is. And that is, again, which goes back to, how much you can use data Or we use Figma for our GUI products, and our writers are writing in Figma too. No, I can't use data in Figma. Sorry, it ain't happening.
Maybe in the future it will be possible.
Yeah.
Now, as Figma is an Adobe company.
Oh, that's
Yeah, a couple of
Yes,
months back,
that's the reason I brought it up. Come on, people, wake up!
Hey, go.
But with the question, are you fast enough for the future of content? I also want to talk a little bit about AI. And AI and structured content, there are a lot of discussions around that. Some people say, now as we have AI and such highly advanced large language models and so on, do we need structured content at all? Or does it make it even better? Can we use AI engines on structured content even better and leverage their results in a better way by marking up certain words as a term or things like that? And how will AI change how we write content in the future, how we create content, and maybe even deliver content? Do you have made some ideas around that already? I mean, it's very fresh, of course.
It's all good for rebuilding content, but where my team is situated in the product development lifecycle, we create the seed content for every new release, and I'm not allowed to point to them, but.
Would you like me to do it for you?
Yes. On the hardware side, yes, you can reuse content all day long, no problem. But software, every friggin' time we have to create new content. So you build whatever AI you want, I'll buy your product, but is it of use to me just yet? I don't think so. No. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking for. Let me tell a short story what I tried with ChatGPT a couple of days back. I took the user manual from my Miele tumble dryer.
That's rebuilding content.
That's rebuilding content, exactly.
Yeah, what you just said. So.
And thinking about personalization of content for different audiences, for example, I took these couple of paragraphs from that 2-column PDF. Throw it at ChatGPT, and it's very serious content, of course. Very serious, written by a German tech writer. And I threw it at ChatGPT and said, okay, now first make a nice step list out of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah? And that paragraph, poetic writing, paragraph-based writing of how to do something in the display of the tumble dryer, it turned that content into nice step list. Please first do this, then go into this menu, then do that, then do that. Nice step list. Then I said, okay, now please turn that into a did a task. And ChatGPT was converting that fluid text, or just text string content into a nice did a XML file. It did a task, actually, with a nice step list. It did a few errors, like inserting a P element in a step and so on, but generally it worked. Then I said, okay, now please convert that into an HTML5 output. Whoops, second later I had that. Then I said, okay, now please give me also a JSON output. Yeah, I did that from the data content. And I said, okay, can you also create me a GraphQL query for that? So yeah, sure. Here's the GraphQL query for your data topic. So, and this all took me maybe like 10 minutes, which is usually traditionally a very long business process and a project to set up with different kind of content transformation frameworks and so on and so on. And I'm wondering how this will influence how we think about or how we approach content projects in the future, where we say, okay, if all that is possible on a very quick, easy level, and maybe just needs a little bit of adoption then, maybe it encourages as knowledge content creators also to think broader about what we can do with our content and how fast we can do that with that content.
I think it takes away the worry about I need to make sure that this needs. I think the focus should be more towards the quality of content that we are producing versus the number of renditions it can create. I mean, that's something, and that is why my personal opinion about this is that focusing on the quality of content, and in that case, whether you should use structured, unstructured, focus your energy on that more than how many renditions it's going to translate into. And then, of course, we can't ignore that part, and that's where the whole content governance and content moderation techniques have to come into play. Now, how much of that is going to need human intervention versus how much of it can be taken care of by the tool? Those are topics that need further discussion and a lot more insight. But from an author's perspective, the focus really should be on quality. What's the kind of content I'm creating?
Yeah.
I think you can do a lot with gisting and reprocessing and reevaluating and those kinds of things. And if you look at machine translation, there's kind of a very similar perspective there, that if you just need to sort of generally understand what's going on, it's pretty magical. However, for those of you who produce content that is regulated, is health and safety information, which is to say if you give people the wrong instructions, they will, put their hand somewhere where it doesn't belong and get hurt.
Or die.
Or die, Bad things. If you produce content that, if used incorrectly or if produced incorrectly, if the text is incorrect, can result in people dying, I would be very careful about AI. Right? Now, with that said, one thing, we talk a lot about ChatGPT, which, by the way, went down today for a while, and it was like the end of the world. And I'd love to take credit for this, but sadly it was Mike Yantosca, who is now at Avalera, but previously was at IBM and was involved in sort of some of the original Ditto stuff. One of the things that he's saying right now is, if you have a sufficiently large corpus of existing, approved, reviewed, accurate, and high-quality content, what you want to think about is applying your AI tools to that corpus, not to the wonderful world that is ChatGPT, which is sourced from I don't know where, right? But rather to, this is my bucket of content, we have reviewed this, we know it's clean, we know it's accurate because it's been through the workflows and all the rest of it. Now, what can we build from that? I think that's actually a much more interesting question to me right now than, you can do some fun things with ChatGPT and it's super entertaining. But if you're in a world of high stakes content, it's terrifying.
And, ChatGPT or whatever AI, is next, is going to give you all the tagging done. It's not going to be any human, tagging all that. And then the third part is the QA, right? So basically making sure that, for all those sensitive areas, compliance, legal issues that we were saying today, be that finance, be that healthcare, whatever it is, right, that needs that. Because why? Because those three groups of tasks are massively time-consuming. So there is going to be people like Adobe who are going to put money behind this because they know there is a lot of money to win. And those savings that we were seeing this morning, with the IDG, if I said it correctly, case, are just going to be peanuts compared to what that's going to generate. So again, I'm not sure if it's going to be 6 months or 2 years, but I see it in those three cases very soon coming.
I really want you to be right, but I don't think you are, in my opinion, because I look at machine translation and it was like, oh, we'll machine translate and then we'll post-edit. Well, that turns out to be, in many cases, actually more expensive because the machine makes annoying, subtle mistakes that are time-consuming and terrible to catch. Again, if your content needs to be really accurate. And that, I think, that is the if. That's the if that I'm hanging my opinions on, right? Because if it just has to be good enough, then great, off we go.
I lived that with Google Translate, and then I tried DeepL. Have you tried DeepL? Yeah. So I've tried DeepL. I've done English Spanish translation. That's the only thing that I've processed. And I wouldn't tell you that it's 100% perfect, but I would say it's like 98, 99.
Yeah.
So, I translate long text with DeepL and have to make maybe 3 tweaks, and that's today, right? So, meaning that obviously these systems are learning.
And the question here is, and I want to continue that discussion with machine translation here for a moment. When machine translation came up, all the translators were crying, oh, we will all get jobless. And the machine translation provider said, no, it will just help you and you can just translate more. That was true to a certain extent until machine translation was still in a state where you could say, the results are like mostly good and maybe good enough for a knowledge support database or whatever. But maybe not for marketing content, maybe especially not for pharmaceutical content or legal content or so, or financial contracts or stuff like that. But if you see how it has advanced, and if you see especially DeepL, where the language quality, if DeepL has context, and if the language quality is of the source content is good, and more or less error-free, but even if it has human errors in the source content, it understands that and still provides the perfect translation for that. And I've seen an example from a German company with Markus Wiedenmeier involved. He has built that by tweaking it a little bit before shooting it to DeepL, and the results are 99% correct. And human translators make more errors than the machine translation process there. And there, the decision for the company who's using that process now was very clear. No human interaction. And the phrase they said is, translation is not part of the content creation process anymore for us. It's part of the publishing process. We are just publishing in 2 languages. And because the quality is just so good. And they can run automatically acrolinks on it, and then if it gets read, it goes back to human reviewer to approve that or not approve that content and maybe change it. But for the majority of content, it works for them, and it's also highly technical content for big machines. So I'm pretty sure machine translation will completely replace human translators over the next years, especially when you bring AI capabilities into that as well to judge on the content and assess the quality and so on.
I just want to make this one's on, right? Yep. Just last week, I fired something over to you. I had taken it and run it through AEM guides specifically, did the machine translation, the Microsoft, and took the German version of it. Now, I'm Swiss background, so I can look at it, but my grammar is garbage. So I sent it to you. I said, is this any good? And while I had sent it to you, I took it and I put it into chat, and I said, here's several paragraphs in German. Review them for grammar quality and hand it back to me and tell me the better version of it and what's different. And in the meantime, what were you doing? Because I got back really good German, apparently. What did you do when I sent you that and I said, is this any good? You, the human.
I also threw it at ChatGPT, and
and how good was the German? How good was it?
What I did is I instructed ChatGPT and said, here's the source content, please assess the quality of it. It gave me quality score, then 85 or something. Then I said, improve the content, but make me a 2-column table, split sentence by sentence, showing me so that I can see source and your changed version side by side, to easily assess what you have changed, and that it's amazing what this thing can do. So,
and I'm going to hand it over to Sebastian, and if there's other questions.
Just a quick one. Just a quick. I still think that the context is everything is important in this conversation, right? And
sure.
that there's a maturity model here, but I do think it's amazing, and it's why we tend to start leaning towards language quality assurance, people who are experts, PhDs in language, to go through the stuff that is going to kill somebody and make sure that it works. And we keep doing assessments of the machine language. It is getting better and better. Right. And when I would just encourage anyone who has Teams, not to plug a Microsoft product, but it's what we're forced to use where I work. And you can hit the more actions on Teams now and auto-translate presentations. And every single bullet, every single thing gets translated. And it's very, very good. And I think the other thing is it's the instantaneousness of it. So it's like some of these things are out of our control, where the orchestration engine is going to be happening so far down out of our control, where I go back to the quality of the content and the context. I'm very much with you on this. I think are the most important things in the end of the day, because they're the things we can control upstream.
The reason why I keep bringing up the quality of the seed content is because the interesting thing is that the content that my team creates, we have consumers who are inside of Cisco as well as obviously our customers. And oftentimes what I see is people take our content and rebuild their books or whatever articles they're writing. And so if Scott made a mistake somewhere, that mistake shows across all the docs that someone else has created. So AI is great, and I'm sure I'll be best friends with it at some point in time. Not yet.
And we'd like to get there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was pretty much what I had. So, if you have any other questions here in the audience that you would like to discuss with us, I'm happy to invite you for that.
Anyone?
Well, nobody has any questions. I'm just sitting here thinking, I'm waiting for the day, and maybe it already exists, for the day somebody develops a GPS in your car that'll yell out, "Your other left, dummy."
Awesome. Okay, good. Then let's close the panel. Thanks so much for being with us here today, and thanks for joining me on this panel discussion here.